From our world-class Australian campus, our passionate lecturers are able to educate trials riders from all over the world. Are you ready to learn? Welcome to the University of Trials. Welcome to the third class in this semester at the University of Trials. Now, in the last lesson, we covered the pros and cons of using either a keyboard or a controller, and we also went into quite a bit of depth about going downhill and, more importantly, going down the fastest way possible. I was actually really surprised in some of the feedback we received because a lot of people that I know are quite experienced riders still learned something from that class. Now, we've got a lot to cover in this class, so let's get straight into it. I'm going to start today's lesson focusing on driving lines and the importance of hitting a ramp on a downhill slope. Now, I'm going to run two examples side by side, and as you can see, they're pretty much in sync up until this point. On the left, we've got a bad example, on the right, a good one. Now, on the left, what I'm going to do is drive too fast and actually land here on an uphill slope. That's going to throw all my momentum out of whack. I'm going to land here on an uphill slope, and now I'm basically trying to accelerate and compensate for the fact that I've actually lost all of my momentum and speed, and it's taken me about 15 seconds to get to this point. On the right now, you can actually see that I slowed down at the top of that crest, cleared that jump much better, and have been able to carry my momentum all the way through. And as you can see the difference here, I finished up until the same point at about 13 seconds. Now, that was a minute portion of the track, and I've saved myself 2 seconds. The main takeaway from this lesson is that carrying momentum through all of the jumps is much more important than just going as fast as you can through some of them. What the designers have done is ensure that some jumps, if you hit it 100%, you will purposefully land on an uphill slope, therefore reducing your momentum. Sometimes it's better to approach a jump slowly and you'll end up faster overall. What I'd like to cover in this lesson is landing on an uphill slope, and importantly, in a situation where there's something quite dangerous behind you. What a lot of people tend to think is because you're being forced backwards, you just need to accelerate at 100%. That's actually far from the case. In the last class, we talked about feathering the throttle and partially using it to ensure that you're maintaining grip without doing a backflip, and that's exactly the technique that's used here. In addition to just using the throttle, you also need to ensure that when your wheels make contact with the platform, they're as close to parallel with the surface as they can be, and ensure that you're leaning forwards to counteract your natural tendency to flip backwards. And now it's time to ramp up the difficulty. And yes, that's the funniest stroke I can think of as a segue. What I want to talk about is this technique right here. This is an extreme example of landing on an uphill slope, but with this example, there's nowhere for you to go. You have to stop and steady yourself on the slope. A great technique to learn. Now what I'm going to do is break it down for you. Now, the approach to this jump isn't important. All I'm going to do here is bounce back up. I'm actually doing this a little bit awkwardly to highlight this point. What I'm trying to show you is if you're in midair, a steep slope below you, how to actually maintain your position without falling backwards. The first thing I'm going to do is rotate the bike so my wheels are almost parallel with the ramp while I'm leaning forward. The next thing that I'm going to do is actually press to the left, and in doing that, sit back down over the bike. All my weight goes over the back wheel, and this is actually very important now because in the next step, I'm going to flick again to the right. What that's doing now is drastically increasing the amount of pressure that's going on the back wheel, which is where all your power is coming from. Remember, this is a rear wheel bike. All your power comes from the back, and all your traction and grip comes from the additional weight and the additional force that you're sort of pushing this wheel down into the ramp. Because of that, you can now accelerate, and as long as you accelerate gently and feather the throttle like we discussed, you'll have a great chance of sticking the landing. We're now going to focus on uphill transitions. This is the process of going from level ground to an uphill slope without losing speed or momentum, and it's key to getting the fastest times. What I'm going to show you here now is a bad example. Now, I've approached the jump completely wrong. When I've transitioned into the jump here, I've actually bounced back off. I don't know if you could see that, but I bounced back off the ramp. What that meant is I've carried so much less speed in, I've barely cleared the jump, and it's just slowed the whole flow down. Now I'm going to show you how to do this properly. The first thing you want to do is enter the jump a little bit slower to ensure that you get both wheels on the ground before you make the transition up. The next thing you want to do is push hard to the left. That lifts the front wheel ever so slightly, but enough so it starts going up the ramp correctly. Now what you want to do is push to the right. By doing this, just at the time where your back wheel moves onto the ramp, you've actually gone from being seated to leaning forward in that transition, and that's the part I really want to focus on. It's all about timing, but it's crucial to make sure that you only lean forward at the point where your back wheel touches the ramp. Now you can accelerate, you clear the jump, and you have a look at how much extra distance I get here just because of that slight change in position. I just want to take another couple of moments to use this technique on a few other examples. Here's a track called The Ascent, and what I'm doing here is showing firstly common mistakes that people make. You can see those transitions were slightly off, and as a result you're having a lot of trouble getting up this hill. Now here's an example that worked properly. I start seated as I suggested in the last one, transition into a forward leaning position, and now I can accelerate, and as you can see the results, I get over the jump with no problems. Very simple example to show you what this technique can do for your riding. And while we're on the topic, I'm going to show you one last section of a track which I know a lot of people have trouble with. This is a very steep uphill slope on Dark City Run. Push to the left to lift your front wheel up, push to the right as your back wheel hits the upward slope, and accelerate. It's pretty straightforward, but as I've told you before, it really comes down to timing. Let's show you one last time. Make sure you are in a firmly seated position like that. You accelerate while pushing to the left very hard, and that will lift up the front wheel to start going up the ramp. Push hard right to make sure that your back wheel just at that right point hits and accelerates and continues to grip on the uphill slope, and after a bit of practice I'm sure you'll be getting this.
Well, there you have it, another lesson down, and I really hope you learned something from that class. Now remember, if you find these useful or if you find that they're improving your riding skills, be sure to share them with everybody you know. So spread the word, and we'll see you next class.
Also, be sure to check out the previous University of Trials classes and the other trials videos.